Hello, welcome to Webinar Wednesdays here at RPI, and thank you for joining our webinar about Kofax TotalAgility this morning. A few housekeeping items before we get started. The webinar will be recorded and shared on our website and on our YouTube channel in the next few days. For those of you joining in today, the slide deck will be shared via email immediately following this webinar. We also have a moderator standing by to take your questions, so please feel free to submit those through the interface as they come up. He'll go ahead and interrupt us or wait till the end to kind of ask all those questions at the same time. If you have any ideas for additional webinar topics, something that you'd like to see kind of in the future, please let us know. We can get that slated on our calendar. Just a quick note here, there's another webinar today as a part of Webinar Wednesdays. We're at 1 o'clock today. We'll be going over our frequently requested brainware enhancements webinar. And then next month in November, we'll be going through Yoga Connect with ECM and ERP, and then some creative uses for iScripts and eForms. So just kind of an overview of some of the common things that we see as far as custom development for your ECM solutions. As I said, my name is Pitts. I have been working in the perceptive content space for about 6 years now. I have a lot of experience within the clinical healthcare products and solutions, so a lot of your integrations with the EMRs. EMRs working with ECMs and kind of document management throughout that whole process. And I also love my dog Tofu.
This is a cute dog. My name is Alex Lindsey. I'm a senior solution architect. I've been working in the automation phase with ECM products and workflow products for about 6 years now. Specialized in accounts payable, human resources, and some other maybe non-standard solutions you might see out there. And I'm also a proud father. A few things on our agenda today. We're going to start out by talking about ourselves, RPI Consultants. If you've joined webinars before, you may skip this part. If not, you'll learn a little bit about us. We'll go into Kofax TotalAgility, what it is and how you can potentially use it. And we've also got a demonstration video for you to see basically what it looks like on the back end as well as the front end. Then we'll have some use cases and examples and close it out with questions.
Perfect.
So a little bit about ourselves. We are RPI Consultants. We are a consulting services firm. We have technical experts ranging from consultants to technical architects, solution architects like Pitts and myself. And we basically run the gamut of anything that you are looking to accomplish we can work with. We have offices in Kansas City, which is where we're broadcasting from today, Baltimore, and Tampa. And we also work with a number of products that run the gamut from perceptive software to OnBase, Brainware, Infor, which is the bulk of our practice located in Baltimore, as well as Kofax, obviously. We are an authorized Kofax service provider and licensed reseller. We have a lot of experience in the accounts payable space, the human resources space, the healthcare space, as well as many other back office and higher education solutions.
Yep. Perfect. So Kofax TotalAgility. Kofax TotalAgility, or KTA, is a flexible content and business process automation platform. At its core, it's really a business process management software, full-featured. It has the ability to kind of connect a lot of your systems together and then provide a lot of the customer-facing functionality that most ECMs don't provide today. In the past, you might be familiar with Kofax Capture or Kofax KTM transformation module. Those products have kind of been lumped together into KTA and sold as one product today. So as I said, KTA, it's that unified platform that connects those systems of engagement. So interacting with your users, whether that's through email, through forms, having them kind of submit those initial requests to kind of kickstart the process, and it connects those to the systems of record. So that's your ECM, your ERP, even your EMR in the healthcare space. What this allows you to do is kind of increase that responsiveness to customers. Customers have that insight into the process the entire time, so they can kind of see where their request is at, where that's at within that current workflow and what those look like. Improving those service levels, and then also on the client side, it's able to help you kind of manage and grow your business, reduce those operating costs. Kind of when everything is all in the same system, it can provide a better analytics. So those make a lot more sense to kind of the business process, seeing how, if you have a solution for onboarding new customers or processing claims or mortgage applications, it kind of gives you those insights as far as, how long does it take for these applications to go through the system, what percentage of them gets approved, gets denied. All of that data is kind of available to the end users. So at at a very high level, these are kind of the main features that we wanted to talk about today as far as what KTA can provide. At the very front, it's an intelligent capture, so content and data capture at the very beginning. We can capture those from the source. We can route those into our process automation and case management. That's the workflow component of the system. While everything goes through the workflow, we're able to give you that process intelligence and analytics. In the past, this was known as Kofax Insight, giving all that insight into the processes through one platform. And then there's also a CRM component of it, so the customer communication management, e-signature functionality, and at the very end, there's that comprehensive integration capabilities within KTA as well. All of this is available through that single platform.
Right, and that's a lot to take in terms of understanding how and why you should use something like KTA, because there's a lot of options there. Yep. So where does it all start? It starts with a document-centric workflow. You're going to be capturing documents, and how are you going to be capturing documents? You may be familiar with Kofax Capture or KTM, the transformation module. You may be a customer of that, or you know of it, so you're familiar with Twain and ISIS scanners and things like that. You may also have a mobile capturing solution as well, but ultimately, with KTA, you're able to capture documents in any real fashion. Email, fax, directory imports, or even just a web service. If you have an open API that can go out and grab stuff, or if there's a push-pull that needs to happen, you can capture documents that way. Along with that, like Pitts has said earlier, you've got Kofax Capture and you've got KTM as well. So it can move into an OCR or extraction process as well, just directly after capture. That can be as complex as you want. AP Agility, which we've done a webinar on in the past, is a complex OCR solution that allows you to basically OCR invoice documents. But you can simplify it even further and do sales orders or packing slips even, and potentially just pull off a purchase order number. If that helps you automate a certain process by OCR and extracting them, then you can basically free up your end users to do a lot more work. After that capture component, there's also process automation. So there's a process design. So this screenshot here just kind of shows you a little bit of a visual of what the workflow component looks like within KTA. Those of you that know OnBase or Perceptive may be familiar with the workflow designer. This is very similar, but there are a lot of options for you to do some configuration and some custom validation, for instance, from these queues. With this, by the way, it's all web-based. So when you have KTA installed, if you're the administrator, and you're wanting to build out a solution, that you would basically do this from a site itself. So it kind of takes some of that hard software, I guess, if you will, that you have to lay down on-prem kind of thing, and kind of lightens it up so you can access the administration console. And within the process designer as well, there's a lot of different queues that you can use. There's user interaction queues, validation queues, export queues, basically anything that you need to do to automate a solution or to give your end users insight into their documents and how they're processing it, no matter what solution really, you can basically do it from this process designer. And along with that, and Pitts has touched on this earlier as well, along with that, with KTA is built in Kofax TotalAgility Analytics. This was previously called Insights, but essentially it's a reporting dashboard. So you can point these at your processes that are in place now. You can get user details on who's doing what, how long it's taking, the SLAs that might have been exceeded, things like that, to basically give you great oversight into your solutions that you have built out within your system.
Yep. And then kind of on the CRM side of things, within that workflow component, we're able to kind of interact with those customers directly from the system. So within the workflow, you're able to kind of build emails dynamically, build forms as they come up as well. I think KTA calls them nodes. So whenever there's an empty node that needs to be populated by an end user, within the workflow, we can generate a form on demand, send an email out to those users for that additional information. And then when that information does come back to us, we can direct those documents wherever they need to go. You can do that ad hoc, you can do that within the workflow, do that in a batch style process, or really just one by one as they're needed. Kind of on top of that, we can also do e-signatures directly from the product. So KTA has that built in directly. We can send documents over to clients for them to sign. They can sign them either doing the click to sign, using biometrics, all the different plugins that are available through KTA itself. And then kind of the big piece here is right out of the box, KTA has a lot of functionality for integrating with different systems and databases. These are the pre-built connectors that exist kind of within the product itself. You're able to connect through a lot of the very popular ERPs. The big thing here is the Microsoft Stack. So they have pre-built connectors for the Microsoft Stack, Dynamic CRM, SharePoint, Exchange, even Link. All of that is just a matter of configuring the system through the GUI. So no development really needed here in order to interact with those other systems. Another thing we wanted to point out here was the robotics process automation. Kofax has a product called KTA. This is an add-on to KTA. KTA is a robotic software that kind of allows you to acquire additional information or documents or what have it from other systems that would typically be a manual process. We can configure KTA to kind of work like an end user and grab all the information that we need, plug that directly into KTA. Since they're kind of part of the same family, the integration works very seamlessly.
Right. And this is kind of where you get your bang for your buck with KTA. The integration component and how you can figure those integrations with your different systems means that you can point to a lot of different places across your enterprise, whether it's one solution or multiple solutions. If you think about a single department within your company, for instance, you're probably using 3 or 4 softwares, or some users may be using a bunch. Having the ability to integrate with all of those within a single workflow is kind of a nice thing to have, and a way to really improve your user interaction. So robotics process automation, KTA, is another example where you could have a process in place, a workflow, and maybe at some point there's an exception that has to happen. A robot can be built up, can be kicked off from the process itself, go out and do its thing, come back, and move forward.
Yep. Perfect.
So moving on to the product demonstration. So in this video, you're basically going to see what it's like to build out a little bit of a process. You'll see the forms designer as well, and then you'll see how that translates to the end user.
So I'm going to give an overview about TotalAgility today. TotalAgility is made up of 2 parts. Again, it's 100% web-based. There's the aspect of the designer, and the designer is where all the development and solution building will be, and then there's the workspace, and the workspace again is going to be web-based, and this is where your user experience and end users would take advantage of the system. So I'm just going to go ahead, and you could log in via a regular login form. There's Windows Active Directory sync, there's SAML, there's tons of aspects of ways that you could authenticate to get in. So I'm going to log in. I'm using Windows authentication. And when you first log in, then what you're met with is the dashboard, and the dashboard is going to be made up of your process designer, your form designer, resources, data, monitoring, integration, system settings, packages, insights, which is like analytics, and so on and so forth. And each solution is made up of a combination of configuration of each of these pieces. And for each piece, then we're going to start with the process designer. And the process designer, when you first log in, you'll have 2 aspects of creating a process. There's the case, and then there's a business process. The main difference between a case and a business process is that one is more dynamic. So something like any type of claim process, or maybe a doctor's visit, something that you don't know exactly what the outcome might be every single time, or there's some other dynamic pieces, then you would build out a case. Then there's the process, and the process is just something more repeatable, something more predictable. So the process does take into consideration that it is always occurring every single time, the same process over and over again. So pretty much we'll start with a process, and with the process, then this is the designer of a process. So you would have, like, you'll name it, is you have a type of business process. I could go in, once I click on this, then I could build out various nodes. I'll just click on that node, which will create an activity. That activity could be one of many various things. The capture activity is usually one of the first things from the process standpoint. There's the extraction, classification, image processing, export, transfer, validation, scan, and you configure those things based upon a bunch of different variables that would need to be configured. And then once you go back into the common activities, you have tons of .NET activity, create new jobs, web services, tons of different options to go into. And then You would continue to build out the solution based upon the business rules that you need, and once you build out those things, then that would create your process, and each of those processes would have various forms, various activities and other options that need to be considered. I'm not going to save this right now. I'm just going to jump into the next aspect of the system, which would be your form designer. Your form designer is going to be where you would create your forms, login forms, your sites. You could have different sites for different processes or different business units or what have you. And then you'll have various activities. So create new jobs, activities, login activities, document activities, scan activities. All of these things are based upon various activities. Then you could also work with your MFPs or your multifunction devices, where you have also native support for several different models as well. So I'm just going to kind of give you some overview of these forms. So you have a general header form, and that's going to be like what you would log in and see at the top. Then you'll have a login form, which that login form will look like whatever you create it to be. This is just a sample of where you would type in a username and password. And then you have a validation form. This is an invoice validation form. And what you'll see here is that when it loads, you have various fields, and each of those fields you could add tons and tons of actions to. Again, 100% activity customizable. These actions, you could create new actions, and then you could choose from several different types of actions. So you can invoke different .NET DLLs. You could add rows for if you have any type of table or columns. You have Kapow integration. You have many different aspects to the system: web service calls, REST service calls, different messages that could be popped up, web capture forms. All of these actions could be done within a form, so that it makes the form that much more dynamic or usable, and create different actions that run on the background, on load, on button presses, things like that. So that's a quick overview of the form to system. The last part that I want to talk about is going to be integration, and the integration part is going to be where you have integration with different systems, whether it's database connection, web services, .NET calls, SharePoint, etc. Your import services, Exchange, where you have email, you have web services, watch folder imports, again, Kapow, Insights, tons and tons of different options for your integrations with third-party systems. So you are not limited in really any way to build out. There's Sign Doc, so if you need to do that it's there. CCM, which is Kofax Communication Manager, you could do that to have any type of correspondence, automatic correspondence within the system. So let's just jump into the database connection. You'll see in the database connection string, we would add a database connection string, add it, and continue. We'll go into a web service example of a configuration. We could choose SOAP, SOAP WCF, RESTful service. We would just choose, in this case, like a RESTful, go add a name for it, put the URL, determine whether or not we need credentials for that. And if we did, then you just add the username and press OK. In this case, we're going to press cancel. But once you've done that and you built it, then you'll have that option to invoke or to call that web service as needed in any part of the system. So that's a quick overview of the designer and the development platform in KTA. And let's just jump over to the web experience for the user. So we'll be met with the login form. In this case, we're going to have this Kofax demo login form where I'll just sign in as myself, and once I'm signed in, then I'm going to be met with what I consider, or what is called, the workspace. Now that workspace, again, this is all customizable in the way that could be role driven, so that if you only wanted a user to log in as and see only a specific amount of activities, or only complete a certain amount of activities or role, like a scanner or a validator, then that's all that would be met with it. So it makes it makes segregation of duties very easy to be built into the system as well. And you'll see here that we have the work queue. The work queue is going to be made up of different queries or filters, and those would customize based upon what you need to see. These are also security driven. So with the security, different roles would see different queries as necessary to make their job that much more efficient. We could customize those. We could add different parameters to it, and depending on the parameters, maybe you want to see things based upon SLA or today's date. You'll see also at the top that each of these menu items, navigation is customizable. So the to-do, jobs, resources, administration, that you'll see each of these things can link to various things. If you have intranet sites that you wanted to add to it, then you can do that, or maybe internal web-based, other web-based platforms that you're using to maybe do research, that you could do that within the system and even create embedded forms or embedded sites. So let's just jump into an activity, for example, and this is going to be a validation activity for an invoice. You'll see that all these fields and buttons and different actions we created in the form designer in the designer platform of KTA. So in this case, we have extraction that it extracted line items based upon the PO, and each of these things, again, we could get into extraction rules and training, classification, those kind of things, and it just becomes that much more robust. But in this part, we're just focusing on the user end of the system. And once that is there, they would validate and so forth. So let's just jump now lastly into the scan form. The scan form is where you would ingest the initial documents. And again, ingestion could be from various activities. This is an example of scanning configuration, where we would have a scanner, we'll just use a file import because I don't have a scanner attached to this machine. But we have document separation, where we can have fixed sheet separation. There's barcodes. There's many ways to separate as well, script separation as well. We could do different profile settings to make sure that whether it's color, black and white, automatic, image enhancements, and so forth. We're just going to do a file import, and here we'll just bring in those images. It supports very many various file types, so PDF, PNG, JPEG, TIFF files, what have you. It'll separate based upon the rules, and then we would create a job. Once you create that job, then it goes along in the process, depending on what you built for your solution, and then it would go through maybe classification, extraction, and so forth, and then an activity would pop up based upon the security, the rules, the routing, things that you designed as part of your system. You have many rules, validation options to make this experience that much more friendly for your users. There's even the work queue. You'll see here is also each column is customizable. You could add whatever that you need to see. Let's say it was an invoice number or what have you. You could add those to the columns and get that data after extraction. So this is just an overview of the system, and I hope that was beneficial, and look forward to seeing you next time.
Thank you very much, Richard, for putting that video together. He's one of our KTA gurus. So hopefully that gave you a good idea of what it looks like on the back end for KTA when you're building out a process, looking at forms, as well as what the user experience would be like when you're actually processing documents or going through whatever workflow you're working through. So we're going to touch on a few use cases and examples that you can use within Kofax TotalAgility. So first and foremost, Kofax has built out these agilities, these total agility solutions. So we have AP agility, mortgage agility, onboarding, claims, to basically have more or less a out-of-the-box solution. It still takes configuration. There's still integration with all these and your different systems and things like that. But more or less, there's a AP agility, mortgage agility, and these guys to basically roll out solutions in a much quicker fashion. On top of that, you've also got customer-built or partner-built solutions. So if you'd like to build out a solution on your own and you're capable in the KTA space, then you can do that. Or you can come to someone like us at RPI Consultants who can build out a solution, give us the requirements. We could build out a lot of that. So again, with this, we've got the pre-built solutions. You've got stuff that you can do that's completely custom. And you've also got the capabilities around the capture, the collaboration, the integration, the process flows, as well as working with other systems as well. So a good example, for instance, would be AP Agility. Essentially, we've done a webinar on this before, so I won't go too much into detail with this, but essentially your invoices are coming in through paper, email, or electronically. It enters IP Agility, so it enters KTA, it's captured, it can go through any kind of, VRS scanning or anything like that you'd like it to do. But essentially, it's going to go through the OCR, optical character recognition, extract data from those invoices, validate that information, in particular purchase order or supplier information, against, let's say, Dynamics AX or Infor for Lawson. Validate that information and essentially verify that it's correct. There may be user interaction where a user has to verify that it's correct. But essentially, once it's done, it's going to spit out the document. That document can go into KTA itself and go through a workflow process, a review process, approvals if it needs to, update it with any other external information like payment information if that needs to be updated on that document, tied to that document, and then export it out into whatever system you need it to be. That can include the document as well if you have an ECM in place where you'd like that document to be stored.
Yep. And another one that we kind of wanted to highlight is Mortgage Agility. So this is another prepackaged solution from Kofax, typically or particularly around the mortgage loan application process. It all starts with the user filling out an online form. They'd like to, inquire about getting a mortgage loan from you. So what happens is they fill out this form, they can submit documents, attach any of the required documents to the particular form, send that into KTA. What KTA can do is, automatically verify their information, integrate with all of your ERPs, the CRMs that you might have in place, even the IRS, a lot of these outside systems that have their open APIs. The connectors inside of KTA can be utilized to kind of integrate with those. And then once that verification is done, we can then pass that on to like an underwriter. So this might be a user within your organization. This is that workflow component. We can route these forms, these loan applications to the specific users for their approval. Throughout this whole time, they could interact with the clients as well if they need to send off correspondence for additional information, or if they just need some smaller pieces, so not necessarily a correspondence, but maybe an ad hoc form that we could generate, send that back to the clients or to the customers. The customers and the clients can kind of talk back and forth to each other. Once that process is approved, we could set up an e-signature process here where we can develop all that documentation that we need, throw an e-signature requirement on there, send that over to the customers for them to sign and come back to our system. When that whole process is approved, we can then integrate that with your system of record. So there might be a central piece of software that you're using to manage all of this information. We could use KTA to integrate with that, update everything as it needs to, and then archive the information or the loan process as a whole. Throughout this entire process, your customers are able to kind of have that visibility throughout the entire cycle here, as they see, where their loan application is at, how long it's going to take to move from step to step, what are the steps in place here. And then from your side, you're able to kind of utilize that Kofax insight, all of those analytics to kind of see, how many mortgage applications were received within this day. How many of those were approved, how many of those were rejected, why were they rejected, why were they approved, and then how much time does it take to kind of process each application. This kind of insight is going to be kind of beneficial for the business moving forward.
So those are two of the kind of out-of-the-box prepackaged solutions, but you can do a number of different things. Packing slips, for instance, we mentioned earlier, human resources, onboarding for employees or recruits or anything like that. Yep. You can build out any kind of process you'd like within KTA. That's the beautiful part about it, is the integrations and the flexibility, yep. And kind of the robust integrations that you can do.
Yeah, it really fills that hole where the business needs to interact with those customers, and it kind of throws a workflow component behind the scenes to kind of help streamline that process. You might have an established system of record right now, so you might be working out of your ERP or your ECM exclusively, but those pieces of software aren't necessarily designed to work with the customers. They're they're not very client facing. So that's where kind of KTA comes into play. You're able to kind of generate those forms, generate those emails on demand, and then kind of drive that process outside of your main piece of software.
Right.
Yep.
All right. Well, if you guys have any questions at this time, now is the time to ask them. We have a moderator standing by. So if you have them, let's hear them.
Perfect.
All right, guys. So first question we have is, you mentioned out-of-the-box connectors. Which one of those, which connectors are available without any custom dev?
So in terms of, so we had those AP agilities, or those agilities that we mentioned earlier. So there was AP agility, claims, onboarding, a mortgage, the one you talked about. But in terms of integrations, there's a lot of out-of-box integrations. So Pitts mentioned the Microsoft stack. So from an accounting standpoint, AX has an out-of-the-box connector that you can basically essentially integrate there. SharePoint's another one. So if you have an ACM where you're sharing docs on SharePoint, for instance, there's a number of different ones that are just out of the box, but it's also very easy to integrate with whatever you need to.
Yep.
Whether that's a database connection, an API that's available for us to talk to through web services, it can be done that way. If you'd like, we can send you a full list as well.
All right, next question. During the demo, it looked like there was a lot of overlapping functionality with something like an on-base or perceptive content. Is it possible to move my solutions into KTA?
Yeah, definitely. So the important thing to note is that KTA is really just that business process management, or that workflow component. It's not necessarily a repository. So it's an apples and oranges comparison here. You're able to migrate a lot of your workflows, almost all of your workflows, into KTA. KTA has a lot more functionality than Perceptive or OnBase does, as far as it has the same functionality as far as workflow, but it has more on top of that because it can do all of the CRM aspects as well. But KTA is not a repository. But that being said, it has a lot of the ability to, or through the connectors, you could utilize any sort of repository that you want, whether that's just a simple file share or using Box or some sort of online service to kind of save your documents, archive everything into their own place. But think of KTA as really just that workflow engine, right? So migrating from OnBase or Perceptive into KTA is a process in itself. It's very custom. We would kind of have to take a look at what your solutions look like within OnBase or what they look like within Perceptive, and then kind of help you guys connect the dots. You know, what gets transferred over, what are we going to do for repository? These are the kinds of questions that we would be asking if you were to come to us with some sort of migration from your systems to KTA. Right.
All right, last question so far, and I'd like to remind you guys, if you have any more questions, please do submit them through the GoToMeeting panel. How is KTA licensed?
KTA is licensed pretty much by page count. So if you're scanning documents in, want to know the general page count. We do invoice processing a lot, so an invoice is usually 1 to 2 pages, so we basically do a calculation based on that on your annual volume. There's also user licenses and SMSA as well.
Perfect.
All right, so if you don't have any more questions, feel free to check out these links. We have our own knowledge base. We do have another webinar this afternoon at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time covering brainware and some of the frequently asked questions about that. So we encourage you to join that and check out our future ones. Yoga Connect is one I'll be doing as well. I'd love for you guys to see that. And again, thank you very much.